a record of the delightful piece they're going to play this evening.
A second glance through the looking glass to ponder. Who are you? Who are you? Haptic Lab. Haptic Labs. Are you ready?
Yes, je ne sais pas. Merry Christmas, Merry Holidays, Tristan. Merry Christmas!
Just still cultivate that childlike, exciting.
What are you grateful for this year?
Appreciation of everyday life, right? The thing
What
that
are you
I'm really
grateful
grateful
for this
for
year?
in our time together, in our time abroad, is that we've just been able to have a lot of time to pause and think and reflect, and to really question a lot of things, like to ask why is this important, why is that important or not important to us, and this period of introspection really just has come from being kind of a little bit uncomfortable, disconnected from a lot of our family, friends, and support network, and a lot of the intense politics back at home, and amidst all of that noise and fear and a lot of fear that's going on, is that we've been able to try and cultivate more quiet time to just think about life, meaning, and what we can really do to create change, starting with cultural change, starting with ourselves, starting with questioning a lot of the norms and social expectations of, like, for example, like one big thing that we've been thinking about is the notion of success. So for you, what does success mean?
Overcoming and superseding your own expectations for yourself. So I think success for me needs to be all internal, is that you cannot let external measures of success be what defines you. So for example, I feel successful in my writing is if I've created a new idea that I'm actually quite excited for, and I think that's the ultimate way I measure success, is my own evaluation of what I've worked on and whether I feel like I've innovated, whether I pushed myself, and success as a combination of hard work and a feeling of self-satisfaction and achievement that I've pushed myself a little bit further. So like, even if I could push my photography or my thinking or my art even 1%, to me that's success.
And Eric asked me, like, what's the word for success in Vietnam? And I said it's thành công. And I explained it to Eric, like, literally what it meant. Thành means to become or to realize. Gong has to do with labor, and a slightly poetic interpretation of that meaning is then thành công, where success means the realization of your labor. And I think in American English, we often, when the word success comes, or like we throw the word success around, it so often has to do either with like material, like consumption, like being able to obtain or consume a certain level in life, a certain level of either material comforts or a certain level of security in terms of your finances, a certain level of kind of social prestige. So a lot of the meaning, I think, of success in American culture has to do with a social prestige recognition, or the ability to obtain some type of kind of material level of comforts. The problem with that is that so much of success is socially or externally determined rather than internally determined, and our interpretation, our poetic interpretation of the Vietnamese notion of thành công has to do at the root of it with your labor, with your work, with your effort, with your attempt, with this French notion of like an essayer, an attempt at something. And it's when it becomes realized, brought into reality, whether it be like for me, this is really useful in thinking about making these artistic small attempts, is that like I can write a line of poetry, or I can write a line for my dissertation, or make a 5-second part of a film, and in that sense that's a small realization of my labor. It's a small attempt at success, and that's all. I mean, and I think it's quite beautiful and empowering to think that way, rather than somewhat of these like socially determined abstract notions of like success that's like kind of like outside of our control. So for me, like that's something that we've been questioning a lot, is what does success or thành this realization of our realization of our labor actually mean? It's about creating something, and then creating something small, and then saying, hey, I made this thing, I'm really proud of this, and sharing it with others.
To creatively experiment, I think it comes down to beginner's mind or child's mind, where you're not held back by the past, what other people have done before. I think the issue is a lot of photographers and artists compare themselves to others, like, oh, that person's already done it, but they've done it better than I have. And they become discouraged because you're comparing yourself to these giants or these masters, and it becomes quite suffocating. I think the truth is, if you have a beginner's mind or a child's mind, you're actually not that concerned of being successful or whether have other people like your work or not. A child makes something for the sake of making it, and they have fun doing it, and it brings them joy. And so I think, at least for myself in my photography and the things I do, I try to treat it like it's the first time I ever did it. So even when I'm out shooting street photography, if I shot the streets for the first time, what do I find interesting and what do I enjoy? And how would I not let concepts of technique, traditional ways of doing something, not cloud my judgment? And I think this is what happens with experts. This is called the experts trap, where your mind becomes fossilized because you're so rigid and stuck in doing things the way you're normally used to doing it. And so being a child, it's like having a flexible mind, of being adaptable, of trying things new that other people haven't done before. And I think it ultimately comes down to being anti-dogma, to be non-dogmatic, to do what makes sense to you and not look to others for approval. When you start a new creative project, how do you approach it?
Honestly, I think I have to turn off my brain a little bit. I tend to overanalyze and overthink, and raise these questions about, like, what does this mean? Where is this going? Even for this film, it took us a while to get started, because I was like, what's the purpose of this film? Like, where is it going? How am I going to edit it? Like, what's the tone? Are people going to think we're just self-centered people who, like, only care about talking about ourselves? And what's the motive? Like, how do we want to empower other people? So, like, I was just so overwhelmed, even starting this film, just because I was, like, in my head a lot. And I think that's what actually obstructs the creative process, is that when we're using our brain to analyze, and analyze, like, what this all means, and also to channel our fears. It's the fears of where or how a creative product or a creative piece will get interpreted that inhibits our creative process. And one of the ways that I approach and strategize how to just make something and not overanalyze it is to remind myself that, first of all, this is just an experiment. It's a little test. It's not who I am. It's not me. It's not my entire life's purpose, but I'm just making it to see. And that's something that's really beautiful. It's like, I'm just doing it to see how it might look like. Like, I'm just making this thing because I want to see what happens. And in that way, for me, I'm detaching what I make, or my work, or my creative piece, from who I am, just for the moment, just so that I can, like, create it and make it. And in that way, then I can just be very present in the process of making something, rather than, like, this other layer that we put into our work or our labor, is that, like, we associate our labor with our ego and who we are. But instead, let's just, treat this like play, like we're just making it to see what happens.
I think the more curiosity, the more childlike we could be, the more happy and prolific we could be. So let's make 2018 an amazing, fantastic new year through challenging conventions and pushing our own personal limits to the next level.
Really grateful for this opportunity. This upcoming year, you can find little pieces of inspiration in your everyday life and from those loved ones around you. But also to look at life like a child, like with childlike wonderment and excitement and hope for what comes next.
A record of the delightful piece they're going to play this evening.
She's like, this is the life. A morning whisper, mechanical steps lead me somewhere I once was. Do you still remember? Walk swiftly, a second glance, and it turns a little glass with wonder. Who are you?